Deep dives and blue skies. Welcome back to Talking Blue with Nick, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you can find.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Talking Blue, the best Dodgers analytical podcast that you can find. I'm your host, Nick. You are listening to episode 113 of Talking Blue. We are here today to recap the Dodgers and the Mets series. Weekend series just wrapped up a few hours ago. Dodgers do win the series. They take 2 out of 3 from the Mets, so that makes 2 out of 3 from the Yankees, the Phillies, and the Mets to open up the second half. We're not able to complete the sweep. A little disappointing. I was hopeful that of all these really good teams the Dodgers are in the midst of facing, the Mets would provide a little bit of a relief, and the Dodgers would be able to sweep them. Weren't able to do it. Bullpen fell apart, and we'll get to that in Game 3. But a lot of good things that did take place. Roki Sasaki, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, a couple guys come into life with the bat. Kyle Tucker finally. Teoscar Hernandez had some good at-bats. Also had some base running. Bad decisions, I'll say, like a couple Dodgers lately. Same thing with Shohei Ohtani. A couple other guys as well, but there were still a lot of things good things overall. Freddie Freeman, he continues to hit after finishing off that Phillies series strong. And we're going to talk about all that stuff. As always, you can get this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on all social media at Talking Blue Pod. You can follow myself at Nick Talking Ball on X, okay? I apologize if today seems a little quick. I have a lot of things going on. I actually wasn't even able to watch a lot of this series as much as I normally do, watching basically every pitch. Had to go to a birthday yesterday, had to help some people move earlier today. I have a family dinner going on outside behind me, so if you hear noise, I apologize. A lot of things going on. Might end up being a pretty quick pod, but I'm going to get in here, try to talk about a lot of really good things, especially Roki Sasaki and what he did Friday night. And then you can actually look forward to later this upcoming week. I will do a Dodgers trade deadline preview, prediction, whatever you want to call it, podcast. I did the exact same thing a year ago, talking about trade candidates potentially for the Dodgers. I'm going to do that again, especially because of the way that this series lines up during the week. It'll be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Dodgers at Mariners. Thursdays are very difficult for me to get on here. I will attempt it, but I might end up just doing the trade deadline pod coming out Thursday before that final series game. Third game of that series, and then I'll probably quickly talk about the 2 games that have already happened, and then the Dodgers will face the Red Sox that weekend, and then the trade deadline is actually a week from tomorrow. It'll be August 3rd. Today is Sunday, July 26th. So that's a lot of yapping. Let's get into some Dodger stuff. Let's do some quick injury/roster stuff. We'll start at the top with the most important guy, like always, Shohei Ohtani. All right, so this knee issue is going to continue all season, it seems, to be very up and down, I guess is the best word to call it, because earlier in the week we had a pretty good update. He threw his bullpen. Things went well. The knee was feeling fine. He was scheduled to throw another bullpen. This was Saturday, and he missed it. He didn't throw his bullpen. I guess the knee didn't really feel that great. So that's the earliest update on Shohei. Keeps him in the exact same spot. He's going to try to get the knee feeling as good as possible before he gets back on the mound. The Dodgers aren't going to rush it. They're not going to, do anything that jeopardizes Shohei. But as of right now, he didn't feel comfortable to make that bullpen. And a lot of people are asking questions. Are the Dodgers going to have to make some trades? A lot of Tarek Skubal talk. That is all a preview that you can look forward to with my trade deadline pod that'll come out later this upcoming week. Edwin Diaz. All right, Dave Roberts announced he will be activated prior to Game 2 of this upcoming series with the Mariners Wednesday night. Okay, so I actually said Kike and Edwin Diaz should both be activated during the series, and I said I wouldn't be surprised if one is activated Tuesday and then the other is activated Wednesday. Exactly the case. Dave Roberts announced, like I said, Edwin Diaz Wednesday he will be activated. Kike Hernandez he will be activated Tuesday for Game 1. So Kike, Edwin Diaz both activated. That'll be really exciting. Blake Snell he finished his second rehab assignment. This was Friday night. He will make his third Wednesday night. It looks like they will try to get him up to about 60 pitches. If I had to guess, probably makes one more after that, and then we could look to see Blake Snell come back early, mid-August. Could potentially, after this start, the third one, maybe come back if he's able to get up to about 60 pitches. And then maybe, the next time out you want to get to 75, 80 pitches. They could just say, hey, let's just do that at the big leagues. You do see that pretty often. Earlier this week, the Yankees did that with Max Fried. Had to go out and make another rehab, and they said, you know what, why don't you just do that at the big league level? So we'll see how that proceeds with Blake Snell, especially with the Shohei injury and a couple things going on in the rotation. They're not going to rush Snell or jeopardize him, but if he is good enough to go out there and throw 75, 80 pitches, maybe just do that at the big league level. Last two guys, as always, Tyler Glasnow, Will Smith. Quickly, Will Smith, same update. There is no update with him. He is still kind of at a standstill. I would imagine next time I get on here and talk, there will be a little bit more news on him. But Tyler Glasnow, for the first time in basically since, May? We have a good update. He threw to hitters Friday for the first time without any issues. That's outstanding. He will throw to hitters once again, I would imagine, probably sometime next week, Thursday, Wednesday. He will throw to hitters. If, again, no problems come up, he can look to go on a rehab assignment fairly soon. Great news from Tyler Glasnow. Still a ways away from getting to see him on a big league mound, but that is a positive update, positive in the right direction. Let's get this series kicked off. Game 1, Friday night, Mets-Dodgers in New York City, in Flushing, Queens. Roki Sasaki takes the mound against the left-handed veteran Sean Manaea. All right, scoring gets underway with the Mets actually in the bottom of the second. Luis Robert Jr. homers to left field off of Sasaki to make it a 1-0 game. The Dodgers would get back into the game, though, thanks to an RBI sac fly from Miguel Rojas, who's in there, of course, to face the left-handed Manaea. Ties the game 1-1. It is a 1-1 game all the way to the 7th inning. Another sac fly for the Dodgers. This time it's Shohei Ohtani. They take the lead to make it a 2-1 game. Next inning, this is an absolutely amazing sign. Kyle Tucker off of AJ Minter, left on left. He hits a 2-run homer to make it a 4-1 game. So it goes from 2-1 to 4-1. Tucker's 8th home run of the year. He actually had 2 hits in this game. We love to see it. It's a 4-1 game. In the bottom of the 8th, Francisco Alvarez would hit a home run to cut the deficit 4-2. This was off of Evan Phillips, who, spoiler, has just given up a ton of home runs this year, and you'll see that later on in this series. Anyways, 4-2, but the Dodgers would hold on. Tanner Scott came on in the 9th inning to get his 16th save. Very clean inning. No hits, no runs, no walks. He gets, like I said, 16th save. Dodgers win 4-2. Roki Sasaki gets his 4th win, only his 4th win of the season. And the Dodgers win by a score of 4-2. They get the series opener. We're going to start with Roki Sasaki. Or, like I said, Sasaki for 7, Evan Phillips for 1, Tanner Scott for 1. We'll start with Sasaki, like I said. 7 innings pitched, only 3 hits allowed, 1 earned run, which was on that homer, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts, and he lowers his ERA to 4.71. Very positive, exciting start for Roki Sasaki. If you guys heard what I talked about a week ago, actually recapping the Sasaki start against the Yankees, I was excited to see what he did against the Mets. And so I couldn't wait. I was, antsy all day to get to see this start and sit down and watch it as a whole. And thankfully, this was the one game of this series that I was able to sit down and watch the entirety of. I watched the first couple innings Saturday night, and then the same thing today. I was able to watch the first few innings, but wasn't able to watch the entirety of it. So I watched the entirety of this game. Like I said, I was so excited, and he delivered. Sasaki delivered. I was hopeful. I was worried. I didn't want to see him, get my hopes up and, drop a stinker on us. Not the case. Sasaki was absolutely electric. Career high 21 swings and misses. That's fantastic. All right. He's flirted with 17, 18 whiffs in his career earlier in this year, a couple times against the Angels, a couple other starts as well. He was able to pass that. I think, like I said, 18 was the career high. He gets to 21. So that's cool. There's only been a couple Dodger starters this year, Yamamoto, Ohtani, Sheehan, and now Sasaki, to generate 20 swings and misses in a game. Usually if you can generate over 20 or more, that's pretty, not rare, but it's noticeable because it doesn't happen every day. That is a lot of swings and misses. Career high 15 of those whiffs came on his splitter. Okay, and last week, the story of Sasaki's start against the Yankees was the velocity, of course. He averaged 100.1 miles an hour, set a new Dodger record in the StatCast era, most 100-mile-an-hour plus fastballs in a game. I think it was 21 or more, 21, I think it was. So the story was the velocity jumping up almost 2.5 miles an hour. Well, the velocity was still good in this game. It wasn't 100 miles an hour. In this game, Sasaki, where is it? He averaged, 98.6. If you would have asked me going into that game, I probably would have said like he averages 98.4 or something like that. I was interested to see, I talked about it last week. Was the jump in velocity due to him being, excited to face the Yankees and rested from the break? Was it, a real mechanical tweak, or was it a little bit of both? The velocity came down, but it was still up from what he does throughout the season, which is 97.8. So, a little bit of both. But the story last week was the velocity. The story this week was how nasty his splitter was, right? The newly revamped splitter that he, kind of changed the entire mindset, basically, back in late April, I think it was, against the Cubs, when he really not ditched, because he still does mix in some fork balls, but he really ditched the fork knuckleball that he threw and really went to a traditional hard splitter like Yamamoto and Ohtani and a couple other guys throughout Major League Baseball. And it looked fantastic in this game. So 62% whiff rate on that pitch. That is nasty. 52% chase rate on the split. So we got a lot of chase. All right, and the one idea, or one kind of, I think what they did purposely with changing the splitter was that, sometimes in this day and age of tunneling and the way that pitchers really approach pitching nowadays, I think we get caught up a lot of times in the big time breaking balls that are super nasty with the spin rate and how much a pitch is moving. And sometimes, what people don't realize is that when you're trying to deal with tunneling and, tunneling a slider off of your fastball, which is, two pitches coming out of the same window, same arm slot, but they do totally different things, and it's basically confusing the hitter's eyes. Sometimes what you might forget, though, is that sometimes the best thing for tunneling is to have not a ton of, drop or movement on your breaking ball. So for Sasaki to have the fastball coming out of the same window as the splitter, and then obviously the splitter has a little bit less drop than it used to, it kind of actually makes it more effective. It leads to more chase. One, because it's in the strike zone a little bit more, so it's not this big difference of, the obvious splitter coming out of his hand, much slower pitch that's kind of easier to spin on. Because the pitch is more in and around the strike zone, the hitters have to honor it a little bit more, and that actually leads to more chase. The proof is in the pudding. So I know that in the second half it's only been 2 starts. But in the first half, he had an overall chase rate of 32.6%. So far in the second half, he has a chase rate of 40.7%. Basically an 8% increase in the chase rate. Okay, and I'm going to talk about his fastball metrics in a second, but I think that his fastball is really continuing to improve. The metrics behind that pitch, the spin rate, the vertical movement, all that stuff, it's really staying on plane much better. So you have 2 pitches that basically have less overall movement, which ultimately makes them easier to tunnel off of, which will actually lead to more chase. Okay, so I think part of the reason he's getting more chase actually is because the fastball is improving, as well as the splitter has gotten so much better. So that is something that is, interesting to me. And like I said, 40% chase rate in the second half so far. To put that in perspective, Christopher Sanchez is the starting pitcher who gets the most chase in Major League Baseball at 38.7. So a 40% chase rate is absolutely elite territory. That would be, if he was able to maintain that, that would be the best in baseball. Obviously, it's just 2 starts, so I understand that. So the splitter was wicked. He actually was, from my eyes, was kind of maneuvering from, the fork ball and the traditional splitter. Because if you look in this start, when you take a look at his RPMs, revolutions per minute, the spin rate, on the year, his splitter averages 913 revolutions per minute. In this game against the Mets, it was averaging 823, so almost down 100 revolutions per minute. So there actually were times in this game where it seemed like he was really going, back and forth between the splitter and the forkball. It does get tracked as multiple pitches because if you go and look, he threw 9 forkballs and 35 splitters. But it seemed like there were some that he threw that were like 92, 93 splitters, and then he threw a couple splitters that were like 88, 89. He was kind of changing the movement on that and changing, some of them were really having that arm side fade to some right-handed hitters. He threw some really nasty ones to Bo Bichette and to Francisco Alvarez to get some swings and misses. So it seems like the splitter is in a fantastic spot right now in terms of getting chase, the drop. It looks really wicked. It really looks, really Yamamoto-esque, honestly, who we know has got some one of the best splitters in the game. But his fastball, that when I talk about Sasaki and him, when he started to turn his season around a couple months ago, and then when he began to fall off again, and all in all of that stuff that coincides with Sasaki and this true roller coaster of a 2026 season, I believe that what makes Sasaki better and what will take him to the next level is his four-seam fastball, okay? And he clearly has made some tweaks in the second half. All right, I'm going to give some numbers that show and back up why the numbers behind the fastball that make it a good pitch. Because as you know, a lot of pitchers can throw hard. But what makes certain guys different is the metrics behind that pitch. Okay, the vertical movement. Okay, the approach angle. A lot of times, certain pitchers don't even need to have, great velocity, great stuff. A lot of times, it's just your release point, where you release the pitch, that can make it effective. Some guys have lower arm slots, lower release points. Tanner Scott, Emmett Sheehan are one of these kind of guys. On other teams, Zach Wheeler, who's the pitcher? I'm blanking on his name. Brian Wu from the Mariners. Those guys have those lower arm slots, so the fastball has that lower approach angle. It's much steeper. So when the ball is coming out of the pitcher's hand, it has that almost rise effect because of the way it's being released, and it makes it like this upshoot fastball. And then other pitchers have a much higher release point. Trey Savage of the Blue Jays, actually Alex Vesia has one of the higher release points in baseball, and that also makes, can make things difficult. So a lot of times pitching has nothing to even do with velocity. It's really, when you dive deep into the arm slots and all that stuff, it's very interesting. So Sasaki, I think he's made some tweaks to his fastball to get the numbers behind it better. So in the first half, Sasaki averaged 97.6 on the fastball, and the perceived velocity was 99. So Sasaki's a guy that gets pretty great extension when he reaches down the mound, 94th percentile in extension. So he's 6'2", 6'3", but he really gets down the mound and uses the entirety of his frame. Everyone is different. There are sometimes tall pitchers who don't have great extension. Most tall pitchers do, like Tyler Glasnow. And then there are some pitchers who aren't even that big. Freddie Peralta, the pitcher the Dodgers face today, isn't really that big, but he usually gets great extension. I don't think he does this season, but so that's why every pitcher is different. But Sasaki, when you combine the great velocity that he has and the extension, he has pretty great perceived velocity. So his fastball in the first half, 97.6. Perceived velocity was 99. The revolutions per minute on his four-seam fastball, the RPMs, 2,239. The IVB, the vertical break, 15.4, which is like league average or slightly below, I think. And then his arm angle was actually 48 degrees. In the second half, the fastball is averaging 99.5, so just under 100. So like I said, in the first half, 97.6. Second half, 99.5, almost 2 miles an hour up. I know that throughout the second half, he started to increase the velocity slowly. So if you were to go back like a month ago in the first half, he wasn't technically averaging 97.6. But for the entirety of the first half, 97.6. In the second half, 99.5. The perceived velocity on that is 100.7 miles an hour. So to the hitter's eyes, right now in the second half, Sasaki's fastball appears 100.7 miles an hour to the hitters, almost 101 miles an hour. The RPMs is up 2,370 RPMs. So the spin rate is up almost 100 revolutions per minute. The IVB is up to 17.1 on average in the second half. So again, the induced vertical break, the vertical movement, the way that pitch is spinning, much better right now. And then he's actually lowered his arm slot. So from 48 degrees to 46.9. So who knows what that could be. That is actually more in line with what he did last year. He actually earlier this season raised his arm slot. It's come down a little bit. So all these numbers show, obviously, the overall raw velocity, the spin rate, and the vertical break. All those metrics behind the fastball are getting much better, which has been one of the biggest issues with Sasaki in his career. He now, for the first time in his career, is seemingly, starting to put together a true positive fastball. All right, the metrics behind it are much more, slightly above average. In this start, he actually was well above average, and that's something that Sasaki's never really had a lot throughout his career. That's something that's very exciting to see. So it seems like him and the Dodgers are starting to figure out the best way for him to approach things with his fastball. He's got that great extension. He's got that great velocity. Maybe a little bit of a lowered arm slot can kind of help with some of that approach angle and all those things that make it difficult for certain hitters. When it comes to the arm slot, everybody, like I said, is different. Some pitchers have the lower arm slot. Some guys have the higher, arm slots. Sasaki is a guy who, in terms of his arm slot, is pretty, and the approach angle is pretty average, with the release point and all that stuff. He's not necessarily way up top like Alex Vesia or somebody who is more of a lower arm slot like Zach Wheeler, the Dodgers saw earlier this week. So the numbers behind the fastball look much real, and for the first time, the fastball looks really good. And again, 99.5 in the second half is what he is averaging. There's only one starting pitcher in baseball who throws that hard on average. That's Jacob Misiorowski. So he is in unprecedented territory in terms of that velocity. Like I said, it's been a roller coaster for Sasaki in 2026, but these hot stretches show there is so much potential in there. So much potential in this in there with Sasaki. Okay, the next step for him, of course, is to sustain this for an extended period of time. But, at least what Sasaki has shown so far this year is that the potential is in there, because in his very short stint in the rookie season he had last year, he really didn't show anything outside of what he did in the postseason in the bullpen. That, entire first month and a half, 2 months on the big leagues before he got injured, he didn't really do anything great except his velocity was decent, I guess, but he didn't get strikeouts or whiffs. The command was horrible. The fastball was getting crushed. The only thing he showed basically was that he has, a great splitter, forkball at the time. That's pretty much it. That's all he did. Now he is showing you he can get whiffs. He can get strikeouts. The command has been better. The splitter's for real. The fastball, the metrics behind it are getting better. All that stuff. He's slowly getting better. Reasons to make you excited. You got to remember this guy is 24 years old, and he is learning a lot about his arm and, the art of pitching. And, I do think at some point, him and a couple other guys that I'll talk about later on, I do think he will have to add a sinker at some point. I do think that could help him. I think he could learn a lot from what Yamamoto has done and a couple other guys. Shohei even throws sinkers at times. So I think that at some point he will have to add a sinker. Maybe he could even start to throw a curveball. He does have a pretty unique pitch style. Usually guys that throw splitters kind of have unique pitching styles. So far, Sasaki, the hype is all the way there in the second half. Super fun. I can't wait to watch his next start, which should come at the end of that Mariners series Thursday, unless the Dodgers want to go with a bullpen game or anything like that throughout the series to keep him on track to pitch on Fridays. But regardless, the thing that gets me really excited is the things he's done with his four-seam fastball. It looks a lot better. So the rest of this game felt like an easy win. Evan Phillips, he did allow another home run, which isn't great, and we'll get to what he did Sunday's game. But a nice and simple save for Tanner Scott. Once again, very clean inning, no hits, no walks, 1-2-3 inning. He looked great. Freddie Freeman, 3 more hits, and we'll talk about him throughout this series because he stayed hot throughout. Teoscar and Shohei, they also had 2 hits in this game. Kyle Tucker, 2 hits, including the home run. All 3 of those guys are who I mentioned at the end of my last podcast to see some success for this series. Teoscar had been ice cold. He had a lot of hits throughout this series. Shohei is a little up and down. He is still throwing out some hits and some doubles, but he really hasn't homered in a while. And, I think he's close to getting hot because he's been hitting the ball hard as of late, and I think he's very close to getting hot, but we haven't seen the true hot streak from Shohei. He hasn't gone nuclear in a little while. I think he's been stuck on 22 home runs for a while now. But like I said, all those guys, Tucker, that's great to see the homer. We'll talk about what he did in Game 2, but overall, really great first win to open up the series. Let's go to Game 2. Yoshinobu Yamamoto is on the mound Saturday night, taking on Nolan McLean, the young right-handed rookie of the New York Mets. So in the third inning, the Dodgers get on the board first thanks to another home run from Kyle Tucker. Back-to-back days with a home run for Tucker, his 9th of the year, makes it 1-0 Dodgers in the third inning. Dodgers would get on the board first, RBI ground out in the what was this? This was also the third inning. Makes it 2-0. Andy Pages brings in Dalton Rushing. Later on, a pass ball from Francisco Alvarez makes it a 3-0 game. Andy Pages with another RBI. This time it's an RBI single to make it 4-0. The Mets would get some more runs on the board to make it a ball game. Bo Bichette an RBI single in the 5th inning. And then later on in the 8th inning, Tyrone Taylor, this came off of Tanner Scott, brought in a couple base runners to make it a 4-3 game. But the Dodgers would hold on. They win another close game, which they've done a lot lately, by a score of 4-3. Yamamoto for 6, Vesia for 1, Edgardo Henriquez for 2/3, Tanner Scott for 1/3, and then Brock Stewart pitches the 9th inning, gets his first save of the year. And I saw this on Twitter, so I wish I could remember who posted it. But he gets his first save since 2023. First save with the Dodgers since 2017. Had no idea that he had a save with the Dodgers in the past. That's pretty crazy. But he gets his first save of the season. Dodgers hang on. Yamamoto gets his 11th win of the season, and we're going to start with Yamamoto. He goes 6 innings pitched, 5 hits, 1 earned run, 3 walks, 5 strikeouts. Like I said, his 11th win of the season. A very steady and calm start from Yamamoto, like he always gives you. Like I said, I wasn't able to watch this game, so I didn't really get to see Yamamoto's entire start. I do know from what I saw in like a quick recap that he didn't have his best stuff in command, but that's just how you know Yamamoto, where he's at in his career, that, he gets 6 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 5 strikeouts, just really easy stuff from him. It seems like when he goes out there against some offenses that aren't great, he's going to eat those guys up like it's nothing. Ground ball outs, not going to walk anyone, get some punch outs, and he's just going to get through 6 easy innings. He lowers his ERA to 2.72, which is 12th in baseball. 8 whiffs on his trademark splitter. 159 batting average against and 261 slug on that splitter. His splitter is 3rd best in baseball according to run value. And that's even with the whiff rate on that pitch being down this year, down 10%. Last year, 42% whiff rate on that pitch, down to 32%. It just shows how steady he is, that even with a little bit less swing and miss and strikeouts this year, still one of the better pitchers in the game. All right. The expected ERA is, 3.20, which is, up from his 2.72 ERA. But if you take a look at his Baseball Savant expected batting average, it's a lot of red. Again, he doesn't have as much strikeouts and swing and miss stuff, but he's actually improved some of his barrel rates and the hard hit numbers. And, as always, Yamamoto is going to get the ground balls. And we know that, his walk rate has improved a ton this year, and that's been one of the reasons that even with less strikeouts, he still has a dominant 2.72 ERA. And yeah, I can't say enough about Yamamoto because, he's as steady as it gets. The velocity was, 95.5, 95.1, which is consistent. He was able to rack up 13 whiffs, which is pretty good. 4 of which came on the 4-seamer, which is nice because I think at his last start he didn't have that many. 8 came on the splitter, like I said. Not really much to talk about. A very easy, boring, often, this is what Yamamoto does, honestly. Gives you a chance to win every day. And very boring, but very good start from Yamamoto. Let's talk about Kyle Tucker and Freddie Freeman now. Back-to-back days with a home run for Kyle Tucker. First time that he's done that all season. I've talked about it all year, how Tucker's just never been able to get going. That's been kind of the thing with his season. Obviously, when you have a mid-season like this, that's kind of obvious, but it's not that he hasn't played well for stints throughout the season. He's just not been able to do it for a long period of time. And what's even crazier is he's had such little amount of home runs this year. This is a guy who basically averages 25 home runs a year for his career. Well, he's got 9 this year. And that's because every time he's homered, he's followed that up with 3, 4 weeks of not home run again. So here we are scraping the surface of August, and he has 9 home runs. Now, hopefully he can get super hot in the second half and, can start to bang out a couple more home runs, and we'll look up and maybe he'll be around, 15, 16 home runs for the year, and that'll at least look a little bit better. But anyways, this is what you want to see from Tucker. You want to see that swagger. You want to see that pop. This is a guy who, what makes Tucker good throughout his career is that he doesn't strike out. He makes contact. He walks a lot, gets on base, has a great eye, and he can still hit for power. Doesn't necessarily crush the baseball in terms of the average exit velocity and the barrel rates and all that kind of stuff. But when he's able to pull the ball in the air, that is where he's going to get some home runs. And you saw that twice in this series, of course. And that second one he crushed. That was the hardest hit ball he has hit all season, 107.7. That's the exit velocity on that home run. Hardest of his season. Okay. Really great to see. And like I said, Tucker, even though he's a quiet guy, and I'm sure he's felt the pressure all year of this contract, first year with the Dodgers, and it's been very much like not swept under the rug. Not on this podcast. I talk about it all the time. He's been very underwhelming for sure. But obviously the Dodgers have the best record in baseball, the most wins. They're on pace for over 100 wins. And, it's kind of seemed as like they can cover it. So he's not really a guy that's getting killed, like on a national, standpoint in terms of the media and talk shows and all that stuff. But very disappointing, obviously, we know. But, there's still, season left for him to turn this around. And, it's probably too far to like turn it around. Like this is going to be the worst season of his career for sure, but at least he has enough time to like get hot, make the numbers look a little bit better. And if he could find a way to get that OPS over 800, and like I said, not have these long homer droughts, maybe he could hit 15, or maybe let's just say he finishes with 17 home runs, but he's able to get that OPS over 800, let's say, 815, which I know is asking a lot because right now I think his OPS on the season is like, what is it, 710? So I know that is asking a lot, but let's say he was able to finish with it. OPS over 800, 17 home runs, like it still would be like underwhelming, no question, but it wouldn't be like, kind of like scary, feeling of like, wow, this guy had a really horrific season. But regardless, Tucker, please get hot. This lineup would feel so much different if Tucker was, the Kyle Tucker we expected. Even though they have a great lineup, he's not supposed to be hitting 7th or 6th. He's supposed to be hitting 2nd. That's where he's supposed to be. He's supposed to be right behind Shohei Ohtani, splitting up Mookie and Freddie, in that lineup, and he's supposed to be hitting 2nd, at the least 3rd or 4th, and hopefully he can get hot. He's got some quiet cockiness to him. When you start to see the bat flips from him jumping out of the box after he makes contact, he's got a pretty like weird swing, but like when he hits homers, it's kind of pretty. So hopefully he can get hot. And then Freddie Freeman, I want to talk about him. 9 for 12 in the last 3 games, obviously not including the Sunday game, but in terms of this second game that we're recapping, 9 for 12 in his last 3 games with 3 doubles, 3 consecutive 3-hit games between the final game versus Philly and then the 2 opening games of this series. So he's been red hot. Now he has his OPS actually over 870. He is raking. After a slow start coming out of the All-Star break, not concerning at all because I knew that he was going to turn around. He's just been so great this year once again, but he's right away putting those, that's again, Kyle Tucker, take notes. Freddie Freeman went into a little bit of a cold spell. How do you, make yourself feel better? You get, the best thing you can do as a hitter is shorten those slumps and extend the hot windows. Obviously much easier said than done. I understand that. And then lastly, before we go to game 3, some bullpen talk. Brock Stewart, first save of the season, first since 2023. And I've said this before about this guy. If he could stay healthy, he has a chance to be a weapon. He's got some great stuff. He very much reminds me of Evan Phillips when you talk about his velocity, like throws pretty hard. He's able to sink it from the right-hand side, cut it with a cutter, big sweeper. The one difference, though, is he actually has the ability to throw a changeup as well. And it's surprising that in his career, at times he struggled with left-handed hitters. I'll talk about that in a sec. But 13.1 innings pitched this year for Brock. He has a 2.03 ERA, a 28% strikeout rate, which is great, and a 31.2% whiff rate. So he's getting a ton of swing and miss and strikeouts. He also has a 3.2% barrel rate, 25.8% hard hit rate, and a 51.6% ground ball rate. Those are all elite. So he's getting strikeouts, whiffs, and he's keeping the ball on the ground with some really, really low average exit velocity, and that's great. Like I said, in the past, he struggled with left-handed hitters for some reason. That's kind of been a bugaboo for him. 2025 OPS versus left-handed hitters was 984. That's crazy. Right now, though, it's down to 473. So he's become more of a, getting back to being more of a neutral pitcher. And it's surprising, like I said, with the ability to throw a changeup, that at times he has struggled versus left-handed hitters. But for whatever reason he's put that behind him. This guy could be a weapon. Don't be surprised if, even right now with Evan Phillips struggling, I think Evan Phillips is going to be fine, and he's going to become part of the high leverage group in the postseason. But don't be surprised if Phillips continues to struggle or whatever coming back from Tommy John. Don't be surprised if Brock Stewart steps up and puts his name into the ring of fire in terms of high leverage relievers, because he's got some great stuff. And again, it's just another example of how deep this bullpen can be. Now, kind of sucks that I brought this up, because they gave the game away in Game 3. Didn't help me out. But ERAs with some of these guys in the bullpen, again, look at all these ERAs. Tanner Scott, 2.32 ERA. Alex Vesia, 2.55 ERA. Edgardo Henriquez, even after allowing a couple runs today, 2.81 ERA. Will Klein, even after allowing some runs today. Enriquez was Saturday night, excuse me. Will Klein was today, Sunday. 3.57 ERA for Will Klein. That's like one of the worst. Jack Dreyer, 3.24 ERA after allowing some earned runs today. Brock Stewart, 2.03 ERA. Evan Phillips, 6.75 ERA, but obviously he's only pitched in like 7 innings. The bullpen has a chance to be not just great, but super deep. All right, and that's what I really like, a lot of options. And that's without Edwin Diaz, who is going to be activated in a couple days, and potentially Blake Trinan as well later on in August. So let's waste no time and let's go to Game 3 of this series. Dodgers will be going for the sweep, of course. You got Emmett Sheehan on the mound looking to rebound against Freddie Peralta. All right, we know about Sheehan's horrific start earlier this week against the Phillies. So the Mets get on the board first. RBI single from Francisco Lindor. This is with no outs, so Dodgers fall down right away. But shout out to Sheehan. He was able to pitch out of it, limit the damage to just 1 run. Dodgers would get on the board in the 3rd inning thanks to an RBI double from Freddie Freeman, who stays red hot to tie up the game. And then an RBI groundout from Max Muncy gives the Dodgers the lead. Later on, Eliezer Alfonso, Dodgers' current backup catcher, RBI groundout makes it a 3-1 game, so Dodgers looking close to a sweep. But things eventually fell apart in the middle innings. Tyrone Taylor, his 8th home run of the year. This came off of Evan Phillips, who came in to try to relieve Jack Dreyer, a couple runners on base. So 2 earned runs go credited to Jack Dreyer, and then the one earned run to Evan Phillips. He gets a 3-run shot from Tyrone Taylor, makes it a 4-3 game for the Mets, who now lead. Later on, pass ball from Dalton Rushing would make it a 5-3 game. And then Marcus Semien, of all people, he hits a 3-run homer to make it an 8-3 game and really put this game to bed. Dodgers weren't able to come back in this game. They lose by a score of 8-3. Finishes up the series. They were able to get the series win, of course, win 2 out of 3. And we're also obviously to win each series on this road trip. They go 6-3 to wrap up a pretty solid road trip to start off the second half. And they will head back to Los Angeles later on today. Off day on Monday is nice, and then they can look forward to playing the Mariners on Tuesday. Emmett Sheehan for 5, Jack Dreyer for 1/3 of an inning. Evan Phillips, the loss goes to him, but really it was Jack Dreyer who allowed those base runners. Evan Phillips just gave up the 1 homer. Will Klein for 1, and then Charlie Barnes came in to pitch the 8th inning. He pitched just 1 inning, and that was all she wrote. Let's quickly talk about Emmett Sheehan. He pitched 5 innings, 3 hits allowed, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 6 strikeouts, no home runs allowed. That's great. Pretty solid start from Emmett, all things considered. We know how bad he's been as of late, and I wanted to give him some credit because the game did not get off to his hot start. Little bloop double to center field that Andy Pages dove for but missed. So leadoff double right after that, RBI single from Francisco Lindor makes it 1-0. Eventually, runners were on, I think, first and second, I want to say, with nobody out, and Emmett Sheehan was able to get out of 2 counts when he was down 3-1. So Carson Bench was at the plate, 3-1 count. Sheehan gets a slider in on him to get a pop out. Right after that, it was Jorge Polanco, 3-1 count. Sheehan gets a fastball upstairs. Polanco pops up to get the second out, and then he got Jared Young to pop up as well. So shout out to Sheehan to get out of that jam, especially when he was behind in the count. The velocity also stabilized for him. Early in the game, he was averaging like 92 miles an hour. There was a couple 91s. So again, early on in the game, things were not looking great, but the velocity did tick back up at least, which is, a positive. He averaged 94 miles an hour in this game, which is down from what he does on the year, but still, that was at least positive that the velocity went back up. 12 whiffs in the game, which is actually on the lower end for Emmett, but the positive, 9 of those 12 came on the four-seamer, and we know how much he struggled this year with the four-seam fastball. Still does get whiffs with that pitch, but it's kind of all or nothing. He either gets a whiff or he gives up a homer or a hard hit ball. So, that's part of the thing is that Emmett, we know, hasn't lacked the whiffs or strikeouts this year. It's really been the massive amount of home runs that's killed him. He didn't give up any in this start, so oddly, it actually is a pretty good start from him. So that's pretty good. So Sheehan, keep going, my brother, and get better, and try to put some of this season behind you and bounce back next week, or continue the bounce back. But pretty solid start anyways. Really what sucks about this game is the bullpen, complete meltdown. Jack Dreyer, again, made a mess for Emmett Phillips to come in and try to get out of. He gives up the homer, so another homer for Evan Phillips. He's kind of struggled with the long ball since he's come back. And then Will Klein, he gave up 4 earned runs later on after that. Wasn't able to keep it a 1-run game. So, sucks. I just talked about how good the bullpen is and their potential. Lately, it's been more the middle innings. Tanner Scott, later on to close things down, has been good, but where the pen has kind of struggled is more, like I said, Evan Phillips and guys like that in the kind of middle reliefs, keeping things together. But, they've been pretty solid as of late, so don't want to kill them or anything like that. The offense didn't help them out either because they got 9 hits, which is great, but they were 2 for 13 with runners in scoring position, 10 strikeouts and just 2 walks. So they had the base runners thanks to some hits, but they struck out and weren't able to get the big hits. And that was a theme throughout this series. 4 for 33 with runners in scoring position throughout the entire series. What really helped the Dodgers win was a little bit of offense and obviously, the great starting pitching that they got. So that is something that we need to look forward to in this next series is the situational hitting, runners in scoring position needs to improve. But overall, before we wrap things up and look ahead to the Mariners series, Dodgers go 6-3 to open the second half, which is great after the disappointing way they finished off the second half, or the first half, with that sweep of getting swept by the Diamondbacks. They also handed some L's to some pretty good pitchers. So not only did they face good teams overall in terms of record, they faced some very good starting pitchers this week, or I should say in the second half so far. They handed losses to Garrett Cole, Cam Schlittler, who might be the best pitcher in the AL right now, Zach Wheeler, who is filthy, and then Nolan McLean as well. So they played against some pretty good starting pitchers, as even a couple other guys that I didn't mention, and handed them some L's. That's pretty good. So the offense lately has been a little bit inconsistent. The at-bats do need to get a little bit better. Freddie Freeman broke out. Tucker's been really good too. Even Teoscar Hernandez throw out some hits. But Mookie Betts, a little bit quiet. Dalton Rushing didn't do a whole lot this weekend series. Would like to see Andy Paz and definitely Shohei get hot. Max Muncy didn't do a whole lot in this series, so would like the offense as a whole. Tommy Edman as well was hitless throughout this weekend series. So all those guys have been kind of up and down, in the second half so far. Would like to see a little bit more of a group effort. I would love to see the whole offense break out because the starting pitching's been great as of late, but the offense has been a little bit hit or miss. So overall, though, the Dodgers have been playing winning baseball. What I do like for sure is they've been very clean with the baseball because we know that last week of the first half, they made a lot of errors. The defense has been much better to start things off in the second half, and they look more like themselves. So we can look ahead to that Mariners series. Like I said, they will head home for 3 against the Mariners. They can enjoy a nice homestand against the Mariners and then eventually the Red Sox. And then I think they will also play the Brewers, I want to say. So some really good teams, some hot teams coming in, like the Red Sox, who we know had that long 15-game win streaks. The starters are still TBD, but it should be Robleski Tuesday, Lauer Wednesday, Sasaki Thursday. They could possibly go with a bullpen to keep a lot of these things like Sasaki going on Fridays and all that stuff. So with the off day Tuesday, they could, if they wanted to, go with a bullpen on Tuesday and then Lauer or Robleski Wednesday and then Lauer Thursday and then Sasaki on Friday if they want. Or a bullpen game mixed in there if Robleski or Lauer eats a lot of innings. So regardless, they could do something like that. But if they don't do a bullpen game, it'll be Robleski Tuesday, Lauer Wednesday, Sasaki Thursday. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys. Pretty fun series overall. Would like to see those guys, like I mentioned, Mookie. I want to see Tucker continue to stay hot. Freddie Freeman. I'd love to see Shohei for sure really turn things around this week. And pretty much the last thing I'll leave you guys is, like I said, I probably will not be able to recap the Mariners-Dodgers series because that series will wrap up Thursday night. But you can look forward to a trade deadline pod that should come out before the Dodgers game Thursday. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about the two games that have gone out at that time. But really, I will talk about some trade deadline stuff. A lot of hot topics. There is a lot of things right now in Dodgerland, specifically about Tarek Skubal. And should the Dodgers pull the trigger and go for Tarek Skubal, who we know is the biggest possible trade chip out there for all major league teams if he's truly available. And if the Tigers make him available, the Dodgers have the prospect capital to get that done. Do they really want to go ahead and pull the trigger on that? Will he be actually available? Do the Dodgers even need him is one of my question marks. We'll see. The trade deadline starting to get kicked off. There was a nice Red Sox-Nationals trade that happened last night. So we'll see if by Thursday, I think it's a good time. By the time Thursday, we probably will have more news about potential trades and who is more likely and all the scuttlebutt. And maybe the Dodgers will have done some early trades. I doubt it, but I'm going to give, like I said, I'll make a video that really talks about potential trade fits. What do the Dodgers need to explore? What do they really need to address, if anything, and the guys that kind of line up with those potential trades. So you can look forward to that. That should be coming out, like I said, sometime Thursday, late afternoon. So that'll be exciting. I'm really excited to do that. So as always, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed. Dodgers have played pretty well as of late. Would like to see the offense turn things around, or not turn things around, but really get hot this upcoming week. It's going to be difficult against a Mariners team. They have great pitching, but as always, you can get this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Follow us on all social media at Talking Blue Pod. You can follow myself at Nick Talking Ball on X. I will see you guys later this week to talk about some trade deadline stuff. Have a great rest of your night and your week. Have a great upcoming week. Go Dodgers. I'll see you guys later this week. Thank you guys so much for listening.